Pete Nakos, On3 Sports, on3nil.com. Also on Twitter, with us on 365 Sports. Pete, thanks for your time with Paul Craig, David Smoak. So what did you make of today's hearing that was held on Capitol Hill?
You know, it was an interesting day on Capitol Hill. And the reason I say that is, right, you hear that Ted Cruz puts a 50-50 chance of getting a bill done. That appears high to me, the high chance. And at the same time, right, social media is afire by comments made by Nick Saban and what was really the first platform he had to really talk about his decision to retire and his thoughts on NIL and revenue sharing and employment post-retirement. Very interesting day on Capitol Hill, especially for a situation where it was a roundtable, not even a legislative hearing.
So, Pete, this being a roundtable and not a legislative hearing, and I know that they, Senator Sloan said that they were very close to a deal. How much are we to believe that, or what does this close mean in Congress math?
I had a chance to be on with Paul Feinbaum earlier, and Paul asked me that, and I kind of stuttered a little and didn't do a best job of explaining it. I'm not going to be a political pundit here, but what I will say is I do think you need to really take a hard look at who's saying it, and obviously Ted Cruz has always been kind of involved in college sports and NIL, and he put on this roundtable today, so he's definitely interested, but he was honest and did say, hey, we probably have 2 months, right? A presidential election's coming. So does it get done? I don't want to say it's dead in the water, but at the same time, I wouldn't put the cart in front of the horse.
Pete, when it comes to NIL specifically, I know this is a roundtable about that, but it seemed like they were talking more about the bigger picture, though. Like the unionization and the employment status and things like that are kind of what popped out in the headlines. But state laws as well, needing to all be on one page. From a direct NIL standpoint and that issue that college sports faces, what stood out to you perhaps most from today?
I think I just said,
okay.
In the sense of sorry. But when I mean that, I mean, I think it's notable that you have Senator Jerry Moran in there speaking openly about how he thinks that there's all this commonality. And you're right, though. They did speak a lot about the future of college sports. And it's really interesting, too, right? You have Nick Saban up there talking about how he backs revenue sharing, but at the same time, wouldn't really back an employment model. And, making sure athletes aren't employees, make sure the NCAA still has power over athletes, right? So it's definitely very interesting time of college sports.
Pete, you mentioned it is an election year and all this. If you gave the coaches a chance, like Nick Saban, to write the bill about revenue sharing, would they be maybe happy to do that, and would they have better ideas on it that maybe others do?
That's a great question. I don't know if they would have a better take on it, but I would definitely be really interested in seeing what that looks like and how they would kind of envision the revenue being split up and how it would be done, right? Talking about revenue sharing, right, that's a big step. I think the next step is to really try to dive into what it looks like, right? Because obviously the collectives want the cash to go through them. The coaches just want it to go through the institutions. And the NCAA wants to make sure it continues to have power, not split away into a new separate governing body that Democrats on the Hill support.
You think we'll be talking about this a year from now and nothing's changed?
I think in a year from now, we'll seriously be talking about revenue sharing starting. And I think that that is very close. I don't think we're going to have any congressional legislation done by then. So it's interesting. And the other thing, too, that people lose sight of, I feel like sometimes, is obviously the NCAA continues to lose in court, right? That's happening with the NLRB and obviously with the NIL and transfer portal preliminary injunctions. And they got another big one coming up with the House versus NCAA case. And college sports could be looking at $4 billion of damages off of that. So I don't think the NCAA really has the option to wait around until next year. But at the same time, you guys heard the same things I did today. I'm not overly encouraged that Congress is going to get this done.
Pete, when the Title IX concerns come up, how legitimate are those? And especially when it comes to like what Jim Phillips said about if it's an employment model, then schools are just going to do the bare minimum to comply with Title IX and pay the money to the sports that make the money.
Yeah, I think that Title IX is being used as a crutch. And the reason why I say that is because not enough people have an understanding of what Title IX looks like in an employment model. I mean, you talk to labor experts, and a lot of them, it's just like their best guess. So when you hear about these folks kind of talking about Title IX and how it would be impacted with employment, nobody truly knows. And I'm not saying like we're going to wait to find out until employment comes, but nobody is an expert right now in what that impact would look like.
Do you feel like, and again, legally, I don't know, I may be talking completely out of, don't really know exactly how to tie it all together, but with NIL, revenue sharing, I've always said, Pete, that the one way that somebody will like put their hand up and go, okay, wait a minute, we can't do this, is if all of a sudden the women's sports started to be affected. Do you agree with that, that they'll figure out a way that would be the one where, we cannot let that happen?
Yeah. I mean, part of me thinks that. I just think that you go back to it, right? And it's like, obviously today's roundtable was encouraging. Like, it was hard to not walk out of there and think like, okay, like there actually seems to be some momentum. But then, at least for me, like you hear about it, you think about it, and then you kind of sit back and you're like, oh wow, like, there's a presidential election coming. Ted Cruz was really honest that there's only a 2-month window. As important as this is to so many people, I don't know if it's like unifying enough to force legislation through.
Pete, go ahead, Paul.
No, Pete, when was the last time that you read about football? Like did something just about, the spread offense?
I feel the same way right now. It's been a minute. It's man, I do the transfer portal too. And by the end of the transfer portal, I'm kind of like, man, like, okay, let's go, like, do something else. But all of a sudden, the transfer portal sounds really attractive today. And I mean, I love my job and I love what I do, but man, it's a lot to try to wrap your head around. And at the same time, you obviously have to come at it with some analysis. And do you take Ted Cruz at face value? Do you not? I don't really know if I'm in a position to become a political pundit, but at the same time, people do make a fair point where it's like, okay, do you trust Ted Cruz or not?
Pete, Nick Saban said what he had to say today, and I want to get to that in a moment. But basically, when he made the comment about his wife talking to him about how all players talk about now is money, and there was like that kind of part of the conversation. Immediately, there was backlash from people who were like, "Dude, you made hundreds of millions of dollars," and yada yada yada. So there's that part of it that coaches just can't really argue against, and I don't know if they'll ever be able to. But as a figurehead, as a spokesperson for college coaches and the game of college football, how do you think that he did, and do you see more of this in his future that could be effective, maybe not with this particular story, but perhaps others moving forward?
Yeah, Nick Saban isn't going anywhere. I thought he was really interesting today. It's hard to not see like the two sides of it, right? Like, yes, Nick Saban has really profited from college football. And it is really ironic that he said some of the things he said. I mean, at the same time, someone else made a good point. I thought, like, Nick Saban didn't just start at Alabama. He worked his way up to get to where he was, just like any other person in the world. So, like, there's that. He's taking this role at ESPN. Nick Saban is not going to leave the spotlight. I also don't know, like, right, we heard him talk today about, like, Miss Terry telling him, like, how athletes only care about money anymore. Like, I think Nick Saban's happy to be involved in these conversations, but like, I don't know if he gets excited about them. You know what I mean? Like, to me, Nick Saban strikes me as the kind of guy who really just like is more than happy to go on ESPN 12 times in the fall and just like chop up about like who he thinks the best quarterback in the SEC is. Like, this topic is not one that college football coaches get overly excited about.
Pete, good luck with that transfer portal. You can't wait for it to open up and what you do.
He's got 6 beautiful weeks before it does.
Yeah.
Where he can
See
the sun.
Is it legal tampering period for
I guess
transfer
so.
portal like in the NFL?
Pete, do something great. Go pick roses or skydive.
Yeah.
Live your life before it opens again.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Pete Nakos, on3.com, On3NIL on Twitter, On3 Sports as well on Twitter with us on 365 Sports. West Virginia.